Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing. And today, once again, the leading lights that we are talking about, not to blow our own trumpet, are actually going to be myself and Craig, because we have a very special episode talking about something we're really excited to jump into in 2025. So, Craig, special guest, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Mr. Special Guest yourself. Yeah, you know what? First of all, let me just say this will be the last podcast of 2024, which I was looking back at it, and it always surprises me that we've been at this for 3 years. I was thinking it was 2, and then I was like, oh no, we started like the first episode was in January of 2022, and then now we're all through 2024. So yeah. It's been quite a ride.
It really has. I'm quite astonished that we've been keeping going. It's almost 3 years now.
That's what I said. Were you not listening to what I was just saying?
I was. No, I'm just like
years. It's not almost 3 years. This is it.
Me knowing 3 years. Me knowing me, it's like I'm quite impressed that we managed to keep it. We never missed an episode. There we go.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been fun. Like I love talking to other authors, and I think that we get so much from talking with other authors. That's why we started this, and that's why I started Hidden Gems. We've talked about this before, where you and I started writing together and in a group, and it was through that collaboration that we raised each other up. We all learned from each other. We all grew together, shared our knowledge. And yeah, so when I started Hidden Gems, it was to sort of keep that going in the sense of helping other authors. I figured, I was able to see where those pain points were, and build out things that can help. And then this podcast is sort of that same sort of thing where, it's like we love talking to other authors and, being part of the Hidden Gems, writing articles and stuff like that. It's often that megaphone, instead of a telephone. So, we're shouting it out instead of having that back and forth. But when we have these podcasts, we're able to have that back and forth with other authors. And that sort of launches into what we are talking about today, which is our new group sessions, where we're trying to sort of bring that idea to more people, where we can get a group of authors together on a regular basis, through video calls like this, where we can actually have conversations and talk about things that are of interest to us all. And so that is, the new sessions. And originally we sort of announced this a few weeks ago through the newsletter and stuff. And we talked about it on Dale's podcast. We were going to call it the Author Accelerator, but then I found out, there's some other service out there called Author Accelerator. And, I know there's lots of things that have multiple names, but I just figured in terms of, just for less confusion, I decided that we should rename it. So, we came up with a new name, and I think it's a little more fun, right? But the new name for it is going to be called the Self-Pub Growth Hub, right?
Say that 3 times fast.
No, I can barely say it. I had to read it again because I keep messing up. I think at one point I was calling it the Self-Pub Group Hug. But yeah, the Self-Pub Growth Hub, right? Because that's what it really is. It's self-published authors growing together. We're trying to create this sort of hub where we will have these regular meetings where we can all get together and discuss things on specific topics. And you and I are going to be sort of the moderators, the hosts. We're going to be the ones sort of bringing the topics, talking about them, teaching what we know. But then the hope is that everyone will sort of participate to that in that discussion. And they, whether they know something about it or not, they can ask questions. If they don't, or if they have input into those things, if they have experience with those things, they can share it. And we can all sort of brainstorm through whatever that topic is together.
That sounds. I think it's really exciting. It's the kind of like we're embarking on something completely new, but I really think it's going to be really beneficial for everyone. I mean, the wonderful thing about like us doing the podcast when we do consult calls and stuff like that is I always find that I end up coming away from every encounter with someone else learning something and being better. So that's why it's really exciting to like make it interactive and communicate with each other.
Yeah, I'm listen, it's something new. We throughout the years, been going for 10 years now with Hidden Gems, and we've launched a number of new things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And when they do, we've got new services that we can offer that are valuable. And if it turns out that it's not, then it's fine. Like, that's the spirit of experimentation and entrepreneurship, and just being able to. That's what I love about running Hidden Gems and being my own bosses. If I decide we should try something, we just try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? But I really do feel like this can be a big benefit. We've already got a number of authors signed up that are interested in being part of it. So what we wanted to do today is go through how it all works, and the 3 different groups that you can be a part of. So so that's why we're here today.
Well, why don't we jump into it and go straight on to the first group?
Right. Well, let's talk about the how it's all going to sort of work, right? So there's like I said, there's 3 groups, right? There'll be like group 1 is going to be this basically focused on book marketing, advertising, promotion, and that's going to be led normally by you, right? You're the expert. You're a go-to advertising marketing guy.
Yes, that's my baby. I'm really excited by it.
Right. And I mean, for those that don't know, you have that advertising background, right? You were on.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll jump straight into it. My background, I think one of the reasons I've been successful in self-publishing is because I came from a background in advertising. One of my first gigs ever as a job was selling radio spots, advertising radio spots. So you learn how to make a good, effective commercial. And then I moved into working for ad agencies in London and New York, and moved into e-commerce to find out how like Facebook works, and then really delve into advertising on Amazon. And I think having that understanding has enabled me to be a lot more successful than I would otherwise. And I think I'm just lucky to have had that background, because when you are a writer, you spent your life learning this craft of telling a story and being a writer and being able to put together a book that people enjoy reading. But these days, because of the way the industry is, you also need to afterwards be kind of at least a semi-proficient marketer and advertiser for yourself to get your book seen. I mean, one of the blog posts I wrote recently was about how Amazon itself has moved so much of its homepage into paid advertising that if you are not paying to market or advertise your book, basically your book is going to be invisible. So yeah, I think it's a very, very important skill for authors to learn. Yeah,
right. And so that's group 1. Group 2 is more of a general self-publishing tips. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, and we'll go over in detail the sort of things we're going to talk about. And then the third one, and so that one's going to be sort of led by both Roland and I, probably one or the other, but sometimes both of us. Just really depends on scheduling and stuff. But in general, I think we both have a lot of experience with that. And then the third one will be AI for authors, right? And that'll be led by myself. And that is something that, as you guys know from listening to this, I'm pretty passionate about, and I spend a lot of my time learning about AI. But when AI first came out, I was like, one of the first things I did was go out and buy a really expensive graphics card computer so that I could run the AI locally and fool around with that on my own side. And I've been part of the InfoStack AI Summit last year. I'm going to be a guest panelist this year as well. I'm working on an AI course. I've written some blog posts about AI. So this is something that I'm really excited about. And, when I first started it, when AI first came, authors were very much against the whole idea. Anytime I mentioned it, I'd get all sorts of emails like, don't even talk about AI. It's really bad. And, nobody should be doing it. And everything has shifted now to where authors are starting to realize that it's not about writing a book for you. It's about how it can make you a more effective, efficient writer. You can ramp up your productivity. You can, fix, break through your writer's block easier, or whatever. There's all sorts of ways that AI can be used. to make you a more productive self-publisher. And so that's the kind of stuff we're going to focus on there. So basically, we've got these 3 groups. People can sign up for one, or they can sign up for all of them. We've got packages, right? The idea being that we'll run each one twice a month. So probably an hour, but maybe it'll be longer. It really depends, right? But we'll have set times. People will know ahead of time the time and the topic, and we will do each one. So in total, there would be, say, 6 sessions in a month if you were doing like the all access pass. But if you were just doing one, then you'd have 2 sessions, right? And then we might do something, again, this will evolve over time, but if people are interested, we might set up, like, say, a Discord where everybody can talk sort of between sessions, since you're getting to know each other, and you can continue to have that conversation, right, in a sort of less open environment than putting out a public group somewhere, right? Yeah, so I think that's basically how it's all going to work, right?
Yeah, I'm excited by all of it. I mean, even excited about the AI stuff, because you know me, I'm like super against AI, except if I've noticed there are applications now where I found myself using it, mostly in like graphic design and stuff, but it's here, and you can either adapt to it or not.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, okay, so let's dive into each of the 3 groups, and then sort of give people an idea of what we sort of loosely are planning to talk about in different sessions. And of course, this is very much going to be a collaboration with the members that are part of that group. If people say, hey, we want to know about this topic or whatever, something happening, we'll talk about that topic, or we'll schedule the next call to be about that topic, especially if, maybe we don't know enough about that yet. So we want to go have a week or 2 to research it, and then come back and be able to say, okay, here's what we know about it. Like at this point, especially after doing 150 some odd episodes of this, we have a lot of contacts in the industry. We know a lot of people between you and I. I've got 5,000, 6,000 authors, that have used Hidden Gems that I in contact with or have contact with. We can get that information. If we don't know, we know who to talk to figure it out, right? So let's talk first about group 1, which is the marketing and advertising promotion one. So what are some of the things that at this point that you think we would want to cover?
Well, I mean, you mentioned that it's good to talk to people ahead of time to see what things they might be interested in approaching, but there are some evergreen topics that I think are a really good one to start off with. One of the most important things is making sure that your book is ready for prime time. So often when I'll do consult calls with authors, I'll see their book, and their book is brilliantly written, and they might have like a really solid blurb, they might have a really solid cover, they might have particular keywords picked out and categories and all the parts of their book, but they might not all gel together, and they might have a cover that actually suits a different genre, and their blurb maybe doesn't grab like the most exciting hook about their book. So I think making sure that your book is as marketable and polished as possible before you even think about advertising is a very important one. And I think part of the general course as well, the general sessions are going to be going into that in a lot more detail.
Yeah.
But just having the overall polish, I think, is important. And once you've done that, I think another thing that's very important as a self-published author is just think about your strategy and where you are in your self-publishing journey. If you've just published your first book, for example, and you've only got one book there, it is going to be very challenging to do traditional advertising and make a profit with that, because you have one book retailing for, I don't know, $4.99, $5.99. So you've only got a small profit margin to play with, and that's quite challenging. But there are different options you can take instead of like traditional Facebook advertising. You could do newsletter promotions, which can help launch your book and get it ranking. You could do blog tours and all sorts of different things that perhaps don't cost as much money, so that way you're actually making a profit because you're not spending money. Maybe they're of reaching a brand new audience in a very cost-effective way, in a way that you can only do once, unlike Facebook advertising. So working out the best strategy for you, I think, is really important in focusing on that. Because if you're a more established author and you've got a bunch of books, then Facebook and advertising on Amazon is going to be is going to end up being a lot easier to make a profit on. But even from there, you've got to start setting up some of the baseline of operations. You've got to work out how many books you're selling at the moment, and then work out how you're going to be able to track the books that you sell. Because if you are not measuring something, then you don't know whether you're improving in it or not improving in your advertising. And one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they first start advertising is they go on their gut a lot. And maybe one day they don't sell any books and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to quit. This is useless. The next day, maybe they'll sell more books than expected, and they're like, this is amazing. If I do this all the time, then I'm gonna actually be able to make a living doing this. And it's actually a journey, and it has ups and downs, and it's roller coasters. And the best way to be able to ride that roller coaster is building guardrails out of actual analytics to know how many books you sold compared to how much money you spent, how many people clicked on your ads, and how effective your ads were, your conversion rate, all these things. So we'll definitely spend time being able to teach and educate you on how to measure all these analytics and set up everything ahead of time. So when you start advertising, you're getting all the information you possibly can. And from there, which platforms do you advertise on? There are a bunch of different platforms that you could use. I tend to focus on Facebook and Instagram advertising, which is like one thing with Meta, and advertising on Amazon. Those are the two ones that I tend to favor, but I've advertised on BookBub, and I know the route you need to take to be able to advertise effectively on BookBub. So if there's enough interest in that, we can certainly run a session on it. But I think primarily I'd like to focus on Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and advertising on Amazon, and how the two can work together. So speaking about that, there's this thing that I love called defensive advertising, which, because I have a big catalog of books, works really well for me. And it works even better if you are also running Facebook ads. They work, it's a, what do you call it? What's that thing where you sniff special scents and they work for you? Not homogenous, I don't know, holistic. There we go. There's a holistic approach, like holistic medicine. So it's a holistic approach to advertising, in that you don't focus it all on one particular platform. And if you can use one platform to amplify the effectiveness of another platform, then it all ends up being more profitable for you. Once you've, we can go through the nuts and bolts of how do you actually set up ads? How do you find the audience that you want to advertise to? How do you know which placements to go into? How do you know what kind of adverts are going to be effective? And that comes down to like a little masterclass in advertising itself. What taglines are going to be effective? How are you going to convince people to click on your ads? So that's something that I will cover. But in addition to that, once you've actually started advertising and you've been running ads, how do you know how to improve your performance? I mean, how do you know if you're making money or losing money? I mean, that should hopefully be the first thing that you find out. But once you figure out how much money you're losing, or hopefully how much money you're making, how do you improve that? What things can you change, and what clues can you get from your analytics to know which things that you need to focus on? Then you could actually go a completely different route. So all the stuff I've been talking about there is mostly been focused on advertising your book as it's published on Amazon. But as you know, I've moved into direct sales recently, which I think is really, really exciting. And for certain authors who are in a certain place in their author journey, it could be exactly the right thing to take your career up to the next level. And so we can cover that and go over the basics, and not just go, this is how you can actually set things up and stuff like that. I think that's almost less important than, are you in a place where this is actually a legitimate option for you? Because if you're just starting out, once again, like Facebook advertising isn't good for an author who's only got one book. If you've only got 2 or 3 books, direct sales is probably not where you want to be right now. You want to build your foundation on Amazon. So there's a lot to cover, and I think that's why I'm kind of excited about doing it in a bi-monthly, or is it bi-weekly? I don't know. Bi-weekly.
Yeah. And I think that one of the really exciting things is the reason why this kind of format, I think, is going to work well for people, as opposed to reading an article or watching just a regular YouTube video. And even though if you miss a class, you can watch the recordings, I still I am a big believer that if you can attend the classes live, you should, because, you know, that interactivity, like technically you could, if there was somebody in the audience, you know, audience, whatever it is, you know, in the group that that wanted to say, hey, here's my ad account, let's go through it and show me how to optimize it. And you can, you know, it's not like a you know, here's my thing and it doesn't really apply to you in some areas. Like, here's this real world example. Let's click through it. Let's show everybody how to do it here with all the actual elements that are, you know, like specific to that case, as opposed to specific to this one random example that I used to write an article on or whatever, right? So I like that idea of interactivity with the group, so that people can actually, you know, say, hey, here's my issue. And they can say to the group, you know, for ads, and we'll talk about this in the other sessions too, but you know, I did this ad and it's not performing. And then like the whole group can look at it and everybody can sort of give their opinions about what they think it is that's making it not perform. You know, maybe they'll say, I don't, you know, something about that image just doesn't sit well with me, or you know, oh look, you know, you're doing this. And I think that's one of the big benefits of doing it in this kind of a setting, right?
Absolutely, because we all learn stuff from each other. I mean, one thing I'd like to do is maybe have particular classes where it's a kind of follow along thing. It's like, hey, this class, we're going to set up defensive ads. I'm going to do it right in front of you, and you guys follow along. And if there's any point in between that you get hung up, then we can actually talk about it, because maybe more than one person is going to be hung up. And just as you said, again, if we're like examining each other's adverts to see why they're working or why not they're not working, there might be things that come up that I wouldn't actually notice or see. I mean, a good example, a few years ago, I wrote a reverse harem romance book. So it was two guys and one girl. And on my cover, I had the two guys looking big and rugged and stuff like that. And the problem, and I wasn't selling very many books. I was like, what's going on? And then a friend of mine who loves to read gay romance was like, well, that looks like a gay romance book. You need to put a girl in there. And it's just these little things that I would never have thought of. Somebody else was able to.
MFM, you had an MFM book and you had no F.
Yeah, exactly.
In the cover. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so, you know, when we're discussing these things, even if you like haven't got to a certain point in your advertising yet, you still have valuable input that you can share with us that will help somebody who might be further along in their journey. So I think building that community and having that conversation and being interactive is going to be where it's all at.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, so let's go into group 2, which is the more general one, right? And that's where I also think that the interactivity and the collaboration will be really, really key. So for example, you know, we might talk about the importance of covers and blurbs, right? Because that's one of those things that I still see coming through the ARC program. You know, just the other day, somebody sent me a message and said, oh, you know, I didn't get a lot of signups and my book's not selling very well, and I don't know why. And I said, and I looked at it right away and I'm like, because your cover is, it has nothing to do with your genre, right? Like it is, you know, they're selling a romance. That's not a romance cover at all. You know, like that's one of your big issues. And, you know, people just don't, you know, some people are just not getting that. And so I think being able to go through and have a group where, for example, authors can come to the group and say, hey, I'm doing a new cover for my fantasy. You guys want to see it? And we'll pop it up and everybody can sort of give their feedback on it. Or they say, hey, I'm writing a blurb. What do you guys think of this? And we can all sort of give our feedback on it. You know, we can have things, you know, maybe that's a regular part. Maybe that'll become a regular part of the general meeting, where at the beginning I'll be like, okay, does anybody today have anything that they want to share before we get into whatever the topic is for today? Does anybody have something that they want to share with the group, like a cover, a blurb, you know, maybe they did their A1 content or something, you know, whatever it is, and they want to just get some feedback from people in the same sort of boat as that. So that collaboration I want to bring to the general group specifically, because I think that's one of the key things that we can do with that group. But we'll also talk about things like other reasons besides those for common reasons for low sales. We might talk about different tools that are useful to self-publish authors. I get a lot of people that ask me about, oh, I don't know how to create a PDF, or I created one and it's 20 megs, even though my EPUB is 5 megs, and we'll show them really quick and easy things that I do. It takes 2 seconds.
A lot of fundamentals. Yeah.
There's always different tools coming out, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and maybe people will have some opinions on it. We can talk about things that are happening in the industry. Often Amazon makes some change, and all of a sudden,
I just wrote a blog post about their latest change.
Yeah,
nuts. So there we go.
Right, exactly. So those kind of things are if you're not dialed in, then it's like all of a sudden something's off and you don't know what, right? And you don't even know, how do I even search for that? Like not making as many sales on that, you don't know what's happening. But when you have a group of people, you say, hey, I'm having this issue, and then maybe somebody else, hey, I have too, and maybe somebody be like, yeah, I was too, and then I found out this, right? And it's through that we can figure that stuff out. And often, some new thing will happen in the industry, and we don't know what to make of it, or we don't know, is that something that's good or bad? These are things that we can discuss in the group and sort of brainstorm around what's happening, and whether or not that's something that will work for us, or if we should just ignore it, or whatever, right? We can talk about key resources that we find helpful. Like there's different YouTube channels that we might watch, different groups that we're a part of that we find value in. We can go through some of those. We can talk about some of the we in the industry, unfortunately, there has been and always probably will be bad actors, companies that are quite willing to take your money, and often a lot of money, and give you very little, if anything, in return. We've had over the years many authors come to us and be like, oh, I spent thousands of dollars and I on this thing, and I didn't do anything. I'm like, oh, why did you do that? Like, you didn't need to do that. Like, that was just so not,
there are many people out there happy to take your money, and that's
right. And they'll convince, especially people that are new to self-publishing, that, oh, you need to do this, right, to succeed. And it's like, no, you didn't need to do that at all. Like, that was completely smart, right? So sometimes we'll hear about those, and it's great to hear from other people about ones that they've discovered, or conversely, services that have worked really well for them, and they can talk about those and say, hey, I just tried this thing and it worked really well, and maybe you guys want to try it. We can talk about reviews. Obviously, I know a lot about reviews. We can talk about different ways to get them. There's lots of different ways to get reviews. We can talk about what to do when you get bad reviews, what to do with sort of even like with beta reading. Like, some people don't understand the purpose of beta reading and think it's kind of like a review, or vice versa. Like, somebody once said, or recently said to me, that they made a comment in an email saying they didn't really get a lot of helpful criticism out of their reviews. I'm like, but that's not really, most authors don't want any criticism in their reviews at all, right? But it sounded to me like they were sort of mixing up the idea of beta readers with reviewers. They thought that the reviewers were going to give them helpful feedback on their book, whereas you don't necessarily want that in your public reviews. That's something that you want privately before you're ready to sell your book, right? So we can talk about all sorts of things like that. We're going wide. That might be a good one. And sorry, and I should mention too, like, one of the ideas for these groups in general too, is that it's mainly going to be me and you, me and or you, and the group, right? But my hope is that once in a while we might have a guest come in, a guest speaker who is an expert on some topic, and they might come in and into one of the discussions, right? So if we and listen, I haven't I haven't even talked to this person about this at all, so I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just using this as an example. So do not send me emails. But like, for instance, because I was going to say we could talk about going wide, right? And on the podcast in the past, we've had Erin Wright, who is an expert on going wide, who's come on our podcast a number of times. Let's say, for example, she wanted to come to our group one day and talk to our group about going wide. That might be something we do, right? So that kind of idea where we might have somebody who's sort of a known expert in the area of whatever the topic is that we're going to talk about, that come and talk to the group. And again, those are things that we would sort of book ahead of time and let people know ahead of time. And so yeah, so that's like the general group. And then the third group is the AI for Authors group. And so that is the idea of, you know, there's so much going on in AI, and it means such a rapidly changing industry. If you follow AI, then your head's probably spinning, right? Because you're going to be following it everywhere. It's just changing daily. I honestly, like, I know that, you know, when you look at your news feeds, everybody's got their Google news feeds and their this and that's, and then because of the way that we're all sort of like being spied upon, we see things that are in our own sort of orbit. And so I know that most of my news feed, I'm seeing AI stuff, and maybe somebody who's not into AI is probably not. Just like a lot of my news feed is about Lego. And you know, probably yours isn't. So you know,
I might have a few James Bond things that pop up in my feed occasionally, right?
And sometimes that might sort of, it's like this echo chamber, and you might all of a sudden sometimes forget that not everyone's seen that. Like I might all of a sudden I'm like, hey, you guys see that, like the big news and Lego, and like people are like, what? That's not big news, dude. And it's like, oh, sorry, that was in my newsfeed. So yeah, to me, AI is constantly changing, and it is, right? But I'm hearing about it a lot because I see those articles a lot. And so I'm always sort of jumping onto what the latest stuff is and reading about some of the new things. I'm experimenting with them. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the mindset of the authors has been changing over the last couple of years since AI sort of like blew up. And it is becoming now where people are much more accepting of it than they were. And more I'm seeing authors taking some steps towards learning about AI. And so what I want to do is have sessions where we talk about things and do live demos, right? So I can pull up ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Meta, whatever, and show us in real time, okay, you know, you put this in. So let's say I'm prompting and I say, you know, come up with a fantasy story idea, and we do it live, and it shows us. And then I say, okay, well, see, your prompt was super vague, so now let's make it a fantasy novel that is about, you know, it's a dark fantasy novel, and it has a, you know, a protagonist that is you know, upset about, you know, and you just, I'll keep refining my prompt, and I can show people in real time what that does, right? So that ability to and then people, and it's not just me, like people might in the group say, hey, you know, I've been trying to write a prompt that gives me this, but it's not giving me the right things. And then we can sort of work together, and I can say, okay, here's some things that we can try to improve that, right? So that interactivity comes into the AI one really well. And what I'm hoping is, you know, somebody might come and be willing to, say, submit their book, and we can push their book right into. This is one thing that you and I just did today, where we were working on an ad for a book, and I took the book, put it into AI. It was one of my books, so, you know, I didn't have, I'm not concerned about that. Some authors might be, and that's fine, and that's why, you know, it's always going to be, you know, a volunteer basis. If somebody wants to submit their book and have me show them how it works, that's fine. And if they don't, that's perfectly fine as well, right? But I took one of my books and I said to ChatGPT, give me what was it, 100 ad was it taglines that we asked for? And
yeah,
like I didn't say anything about the book. I uploaded the book and I said, give me 100 ad taglines. and it did, and it gave me 100, and it even grouped them. I don't know if you ended up looking at the doc because I sent it to you.
I did.
It like grouped them by kind of like subject, or like something about like, oh, these are action oriented, and these were so that kind of thing where it's like I could always push in our books, but I would rather have somebody say, hey, do it with my book, because then they sort of also it shows people that it's not like this pre-canned thing where I like before the meeting figured out the best prompts to use to give me the results I want. Like it's not like that, right? It's like, give me something fresh and let's put it in and let's work real time to see, and you'll see the process of how you get to that answer. It's not always you're not always going to have that for first prompt be your perfect prompt. So talking about prompting, talking about brainstorming, talking about world building, talking about the differences between all the models. There's a lot of the models are Claude, you have Claude, you have Gemini, the big ones, Claude, Gemini, Meta, ChatGPT. They're all different, right? They're all built on sort of different training sets. They have different weights, they have different thises and that's. So you can do the same prompt in one, and of course if you do the same prompt in ChatGPT over and over, you're still going to get a different response too. But if you put that same prompt in Claude versus ChatGPT versus Gemini, the feel of what it gives you is different, right? And so some people might like one model over the other. So we can pull them all up and say, okay, let's go through them all, and I'll show you sort of where those differences are and why you might want to pick one versus another for a specific task. And then so then another one would be tools, right? There's a lot of tools built on AI, and the tools that like for example, if you were to use ChatGPT, you can build custom GPTs, which basically is this piece of, it's not code at all. Like it's really just essentially it's just a prompt that is sort of pre-baked into a it's called a custom GPT. And like I have one specifically for working with our podcasts, and where it's already set up and it understands what our podcast is all about. So if I go in and I say, okay, here's details of this week's podcast, help me generate some of the content that we need for it, it already understands that. I don't have to retrain. I don't have to go through every single time I open up the window and give it the same instructions all the time, right? So you might build a custom GPT that has all your books loaded in so that you can keep going back to that and asking, maybe it's your story Bible, right? And then you can ask questions about your books because you don't remember. You're 10 books in and I don't remember, whether Bob had an uncle and what color eyes Julie had, and you just ask your custom GPT, right? You can have these things built. There's Notebook LM. That's like this cool thing that I've been fooling around with. You can use Canvas. Like there's so many different tools. Pseudo-write. We can talk about the legality and the ethics, right? We've talked about it before. I don't know that it's something that we necessarily want to spend a whole session on, but it is something that we can bring up, especially if anything changes. There's a lot of lawsuits out there, but they're all sort of going on, and they're not. I don't think they're going to resolve anytime soon. There is. We can talk about writing with it. I don't necessarily think that you, as a writer, ethically, you'd want to use it to write for you. And I can show you why it's not a great writer, but I can also show you how it can be used to help you with your writing, because especially when you're blocked, when you don't really know where to go, you can have it generate stuff that you can then use as that seed to unblock you. A lot of people use it to write blurbs, right? I can show you how to do that. It's very easy, really.
And you don't, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go with that particular blurb.
I wouldn't.
I will say that I like write blurbs a lot, and the one thing I think it is useful for authors who don't write blurbs is it helps you understand the structure of an effective blurb. But yeah, even if because you know me, I'm anti-AI, but even I know that there are things that AI can be useful for.
Yeah, and I mean, like sometimes if, like I said, well, I have that podcast one, and a lot of times we record these podcasts, and I don't get to writing the intro to them for like weeks, you know, and then I forget, kind of like I know what the topic is, but I forget sort of what some of the details were. And sometimes I'll take that transcript, I'll download the transcript of it, pop it into my custom GPT, and ask it to give me a summary of what the main points were, so that I can use those to build that intro. And then it reminds me, it's like, oh yeah, you know. And that's one of those great things that you can use with it, is to summarize stuff. Like I was saying, with your books, you upload those books and you ask it questions. And that's one of those things, like Google with that Notebook LM thing, which is amazing. You pop your book in, they're showing you that, where yeah, you pop in your book and then it can generate a podcast with two AIs, which do not sound like AIs, two people, it sounds like, having a discussion about your book. Like it's amazing, right? But these things have their place. And like you said, like you can get it to generate something for you, but that doesn't mean use it verbatim. You use it as sort of like a seed. Same with like you can have it generate social media posts, generate, like we were talking earlier, ad content. You know, all of that stuff is very, very useful for people if they want to work faster, get through blocks, get themselves rolling. Brainstorming is actually, like, to me, the main purpose as for an author for AI. I love it for brainstorming, for coming up with like character backstory ideas and clues if you're writing a mystery, foreshadowing, you know, like just all sorts of, you know, character names, obviously, you know, like just so many different things, you know, never mind the whole like you're staring at a blank page, or give me a fantasy novel idea, you know, like and again, like it's going to come up with ideas, and a lot of them are going to be sort of very cliche, right? But that's not the point. You're not supposed to like just take it. You use it, like brainstorming, to trigger your brain to move in directions that it just wasn't moving. That's the whole reason we brainstorm with a group, right? Everybody's brain moves differently, and we all sort of, you know, I will say something and it will trigger somebody else to all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. But now that you've said that, you know, I'm being able to think of something that's completely different, right? That my brain wasn't working in sort of that mode. That's the whole reason why we brainstorm. And when you brainstorm with AI, you're brainstorming almost with the whole world, where, you know, it's giving you sort of ideas that you never would have thought of, and allowing you to your own brain to sort of then follow those paths that it wouldn't have gotten to on its own. But once it did, it allows for your own brand of creativity to start from a point that you might not have started from. And yeah, so that's, I mean, those are the three groups. Like I said, we're not gonna, it's not like, oh, these are the topics we're gonna cover in this order and we're not deviating from it. Like, it's really gonna be very much a collaborative thing. Or what do you guys want to talk about next week? I'm happy to talk about this thing, but if you guys rather talk about something else, you know, let me know. And every week, you know, we'll publish sort of like the plan for the next session, which will be, you know, in 2 weeks time. And that way, you know, people will know and they can plan whether they want to attend. And I mean, hopefully people will come to all the sessions, but obviously I know that that's never going to be possible. People have busy schedules, the timelines might not work, whatever, but and we will have recordings, but like I said, the more you are able to attend in person, the more you're going to get out of them, for sure. And so,
and I think you mentioned the interactivity, but I think part of it will also be just catching up with each other to see how they've applied what we've spoken about, and whether it's been successful or not. And I mean, that can be a massive game changer. We've used the story many times of how we were in that writing group, and there was the first person to hit that $10,000 a month stage, and then so many people followed him. So when you're in a community of writers, I think it's really valuable because most people don't get it. I always say writers hear the sound of the trumpets. I mean, you and I and all the people we talk to in consult calls, all the people we come in for our podcast, they get it. They understand this crazy thing that we do, whereas most people don't. And I think there's something very healthy to be in a community of people who get it. And
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's a great point, because when you teach somebody something and then they go away and they try it. I mean, this happens all the time, right? You learn something and then you come home and you try it, or you watch the video and you go and you try it, and then it didn't work exactly the way it did when that person was showing you, right? And you got blocked. Or you read an article and they're like, oh, this stuff and this stuff and this stuff. But then, something's a little different. Maybe the application changed a bit and they changed a menu thing. And now all of a sudden you can't find the thing that they said to do. And it throws you off completely, right? With this interactivity, you're able to come the next week and be like, hey, you said to do this last week, but then when I tried, it didn't work. And oh, really? Okay, well, let's figure out why, right? Maybe you missed something, maybe something's changed, maybe your case is different in some way that has made that, and having these groups allows for that. So I think, again, it's something that I'm hoping everybody will find a lot of value in, and I'm hoping that a lot of people will sign up, and because obviously the more we have, the more collaborative, the more minds we'll have to draw on, the more people will be able to help. And I think it's just a lot of fun. The networking aspect of it too, right? The ability to meet other authors doing the same kind of thing you're doing. It's a very lonely profession, right? Writing is often, I spend my whole day in my office by myself, right? So being able to talk to other people that get it, that know, we've talked about this before too, where it's like you tell somebody you're an author and they're like, oh, so you just sit around all day and they think you have this cushy life where you just write some words and go for a coffee, and it's like if you're not writing, you don't get it, right? We'll have this group of people that get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's gonna grow. So I say get in on the ground floor, be one of the first members, because the nice thing is, have you said this phrase already? Because I always tend to repeat ourselves: a rising tide lifts all ships, and that's I think that the important thing.
Sure. Yeah, and so we're starting them in January. You can join anytime. The way it's going to work is, when you start, in the month that you start, because they might have already had some sessions, or maybe they haven't. Either way, the month that you start, you'll get for free. You can try it out, right? And then it's the following month that you'd be paying for it if you want to continue. And if you don't, then you don't, right? The pricing, it's $50 a month for one of the classes. But if you want that all access pass, it's $100 a month, and then you'd be able to attend any of the 3 classes. And there's, again, two classes, 2 sessions per month, so that would be 6 sessions. You can attend only the ones that interest you, attend them all, either way, and let's give it a try and have some fun with it. I think that it will it could really change the trajectory of your career. If you really, if there's certain things that you're struggling with, this is the best way to get help. And it's a lot cheaper than having consult calls, right? Where, you're going to be spending a lot more than that per hour. And sure, you'll get that one-on-one help, but you're also going to miss out on all that other stuff. There's a lot of things that you don't know, right? And so even if you had a consult call, you wouldn't know to ask. You attend these sessions, you're going to learn about stuff that you didn't even know existed. And that, I think, is one of those things that can really propel your career. And those are the things that some of the most interesting things that I've ever learned are things that I didn't even know that they existed until somebody told me about it. So I wasn't going looking for it. Somebody said to me, "Oh yeah, you hear about this? What?" It's like, that's amazing, right? So anyway, that's the thing that we're doing in 2025. I hope you all come and join us.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, when you hear this, if you we'll pop a link down below to find out more information. So if you're listening to this and you want to find out more, make sure you follow that link. And if you have some thoughts, don't be shy about scrolling down to that comment section down there and leaving a comment and seeing whether you're excited about this, whether you think you want to join. If you have any thoughts whatsoever, we are really, really excited to hear them. So that's it for 2024, I guess then, Craig.
Yep, that is it. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy holidays. Be safe, be successful, and come and join our self-pub growth hub in 2025.
Say that 3 times. Yes. And thank you for listening to us for this whole year. We've really appreciated it. And we've definitely noticed the last half of the year, it's more and more people are like, oh, we'll listen to your podcast and we find it valuable. So we so hope that you continue to find us valuable in the new year. So anyway, we will be back in 2025 with a brand new episode of Fully Booked. So until then, cheerio.